You are about to witness a story the world tried to hide behind headlines. A story where truth burned brighter than politics and the streets of Tel Aviv lit up, not just from fire, but from awakening. This isn't just about Trump. It's not just about Israel. This is about what happens when silence explodes, when arrogance collapses, and when people, ordinary people, finally stand up to the so-called giants of power. This is the moment where a man once seen as untouchable was called what he truly became, a lawless bully. And while he sat in comfort, cities shook, voices rose, and a fire spread, not just through concrete, but through conscience. What you're about to hear isn't filtered. It's not soft. It's not comfortable. It's raw. It's real. It's the kind of truth that makes you sit back and rethink everything you've been told. So don't look away. Don't pause. Watch till the final word. Because by the time we reach the end, you won't just understand what happened. You'll understand why the world may never be the same again. Let's begin. When global leaders begin to speak in one voice against a man who once held the most powerful office on earth, the message isn't just loud, it's undeniable. Donald Trump, once hailed by his supporters as bold and unapologetic, is now being labeled across international platforms as a lawless bully. That phrase didn't come from the fringes. They came from diplomats, former allies, and even voices within the very nations that once stood beside him. Why? Because his actions have gone beyond politics. They've broken norms, torn at the fabric of diplomacy, and fueled flames where peace was desperately needed. He didn't just challenge the system, he bulldozed through it, leaving behind a trail of chaos dressed up as strategy. The problem isn't just what he said, it's what his words set in motion. His unquestioning support for Israel, even in moments of clear imbalance and violence, sent a message to the world: might makes right. And when that message comes from someone with power, it gives license to the worst instincts in others. What followed were policies that emboldened extremism, ignored international law, and silenced those who cried out for justice. From the Muslim world to Europe, from the streets of the global South to the chambers of the United Nations, the outcry grew louder. This isn't leadership, it's provocation. Trump's behavior redefined diplomacy not as a dialogue, but as domination. He chose sides with sharpness, inflamed tensions with tweets, and dismissed the very rules that hold global peace together. The consequences? Civilians caught in the crossfire, cities burning, alliances strained. His style, once admired for its defiance, is now being recognized for what it truly was: recklessness without responsibility. And when respected voices from around the globe begin calling him a lawless bully, it's not just political pushback, it's a moral stand against the damage he's done. This label didn't appear overnight. It was earned through a series of decisions that ignored consequence, overlooked human cost, and placed ego above ethics. And now the world watches as the consequences catch up. A leader who once claimed to bring peace has instead left behind instability and division. The world is not just reacting to Trump, it's rejecting the playbook he wrote. Because what once looked like strength has finally been unmasked as unchecked arrogance, and the world is no longer willing to stay silent. When fire breaks out in the heart of a nation, it's never just about flames, it's about what lit the match. Tel Aviv, long seen as a symbol of Israeli modernity and control, became the stage for something no one expected: unrest from within. What began as protests against leadership quickly turned into something much deeper. Crowds filled the streets, not just with anger, but with exhaustion. Decades of one-sided policy, endless conflict, and growing isolation had finally boiled over. And in the middle of that chaos, it wasn't foreign enemies Israel feared most. It was the voice of its own people. The fire that burned through Tel Aviv didn't come from outsiders. It came from within. It was the cry of those who had watched too many promises turn into ashes, too many leaders speak of peace while delivering silence, too many moments where justice was buried under excuses. When Trump backed Israel without question, he may have thought he was offering support, but what he really did was pour gasoline on the tensions already running high. His unwavering stance emboldened decisions that ignored moderation, and that disregard came back home in the form of protests, flames, and a city that no longer believed in its own narrative. As buildings smoldered and police clashed with demonstrators, the international community watched in shock, not because unrest in the region is new, but because it was Tel Aviv, the heart of a nation that always appeared unshaken. That illusion broke. The people weren't chanting against enemies abroad. They were demanding answers from their own government. They were questioning alliances, challenging the blind loyalty between Israel and the United States, and calling out the role of global figures like Trump, whose policies had ignored the long-term human cost. This wasn't a foreign attack. It was a domestic reckoning. The flames were not acts of terrorism. They were symbols of truth breaking out where denial once lived. And while the leadership tried to frame it as chaos, the people knew better. This was the fire of awakening, the fire of a population saying, we will no longer carry the burden of silence. Tel Aviv didn't just burn physically, it burned through years of built-up frustration, and in that burning, a nation looked itself in the mirror and couldn't look away. The alliance between the United States and Israel has long been presented as unbreakable, a bond rooted in shared interests and common goals. But recent events have pulled back the curtain, exposing cracks in that relationship and drawing sharp scrutiny from the international stage. What once was seen as a strategic partnership is now being viewed by many global observers as dangerous, one-sided, and destabilizing. Trump's administration amplified this perception by aligning the United States so closely with Israel's most extreme positions that it stripped away any pretense of neutrality. The result wasn't just isolation for America's diplomacy. It was outrage from nations that once respected its role as a mediator. Across Europe, the Middle East, and even within U.S. borders, voices have risen questioning the cost of this alliance. How can peace be achieved when one side is given unconditional support and the other is silenced through force, sanctions, or media manipulation? The U.S.-Israel relationship, as it stands, is no longer seen as a balanced partnership, but as a blind allegiance that emboldens injustice. Trump's moves, like relocating the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, backing military actions without restraint, and ignoring Palestinian suffering, only added fuel to a fire that has now engulfed the reputation of both nations in the eyes of the world. What makes this moment so significant is the global shift in awareness. People are no longer depending solely on government reports or state-run narratives. Social media, independent journalism, and grassroots movements have filled the gap, shedding light on the impact of American policy, not just on Israel, but on the wider region. The U.S. is being called out not because of its power, but because of how that power has been used recklessly, without accountability, and often without regard for basic human dignity. This scrutiny isn't coming only from adversaries. Allies, too, are beginning to reconsider their alignment. They are asking hard questions about where moral responsibility ends and political convenience begins. They're beginning to understand that standing beside injustice, even if it's disguised as strategy, comes at a cost. And that cost is trust. America's image as a global leader has taken a hit, not because it stood strong, but because it refused to stand fair. The alliance, once admired, now stands in judgment, not just by nations, but by history. For decades, the dominant narrative around the Israeli conflict has been tightly controlled, shaped by official statements, and filtered through media aligned with political interests. But now, the silence is cracking from within. Inside Israel itself, voices that were once quiet are rising with courage. Journalists, former soldiers, academics, and everyday citizens are beginning to speak not only of fear and survival, but of conscience. They are questioning the narrative that paints all opposition as terrorism, that justifies every strike as defense, and that uses security as a shield against accountability. What's new isn't the criticism, it's where it's coming from, within the heart of Israel. These are not enemies or outsiders. These are Israelis who have lived the reality from the inside. They've seen how truth is twisted, how military actions are defended even when the civilian cost is undeniable, and how generations have been raised to see the world in black and white, us versus them. But now, cracks are forming. Former IDF soldiers are speaking out about what they were ordered to do. Parents are marching in the streets demanding peace instead of more bloodshed. Artists and writers are refusing to be silent, choosing integrity over fear. These voices are not anti-Israel. They are pro-truth, and they are growing louder with every injustice ignored. This shift is monumental because it's not easy to question your own side. It takes a different kind of strength to look in the mirror and say, we have to do better. The pressure to conform in Israel is immense. Critics are often labeled traitors, but still they rise because they understand that the soul of a nation is not in how loudly it defends itself, but in how bravely it admits when it's wrong. And right now, those brave voices are cutting through years of silence with sharp, undeniable clarity. Their courage is inspiring a new generation, both inside and outside the country, to ask deeper questions, to see beyond borders, beyond bias, and into the humanity of the people on the other side. When truth comes from within, it's harder to dismiss, and that's exactly what's happening. The world is no longer hearing criticism only from those affected by Israeli policy. It's hearing it from Israelis themselves. And that, more than anything, is a sign that change is not just possible, it's already beginning. Power without restraint is not strength, it's danger. And when that power wears a suit, holds the world's microphone, and acts as if it answers to no one, the consequences are never small. Trump's foreign policy, driven more by ego than ethics, pushed the boundaries of diplomacy into a dangerous new zone. What was once handled with delicate negotiation became a stage for bold declarations, brash decisions, and reckless abandon. But the world is not blind. Every action has a ripple. Every careless move sends a signal. And now nations are beginning to ask the question that was once whispered quietly: what is the real cost of arrogance in leadership? Under Trump, alliances weren't partnerships, they were performances. Decisions weren't guided by compassion or strategy, they were fueled by applause and defiance. He reshaped America's role in the world from mediator to agitator, from peacekeeper to provocateur. And while that swagger might have pleased certain audiences at home, globally, it eroded trust. Nations that once looked to the U.S. for stability began to see it as a source of tension. The world watched as norms were broken, allies were dismissed, and enemies were provoked, not with thoughtful policy, but with tweets and threats. The problem isn't just what Trump did, it's what he normalized. The idea that a leader can act without consequence, speak without truth, and impose without listening. That kind of leadership may win short-term headlines, but it leaves long-term scars. Across the globe, people began to feel the shift. Refugees who had once found hope in America were turned away. Peace processes that had taken years to build were dismantled in days. And every time a line was crossed, the justification was framed as strength, when in truth, it was neglect dressed up as courage. Now the world is measuring the damage, not just in politics, but in principle. The cost of arrogance isn't paid in dollars. It's paid in lost trust, broken peace, and rising instability. And that bill is being handed not just to Trump, but to every system that enabled him. It's a warning to future leaders that power is a responsibility, not a game. Because when arrogance leads, justice retreats. And the world cannot afford more leaders who mistake dominance for wisdom or fear for respect. Out of chaos sometimes comes clarity. And in the wake of Tel Aviv burning and Trump's actions being condemned globally, a deeper truth has begun to rise. It is the truth that fire can purify, that destruction can awaken, and that even in the darkest moments, a spark of realization can ignite movements that reshape nations. The scenes of unrest in Israel, the backlash against blind alliances, and the cries for justice echoing across continents are not signs of collapse. They are signs of people refusing to be silent anymore. The world is shifting. No longer content with being passive spectators, people are rising up to demand accountability from those who have long acted without it. The flames that lit up Tel Aviv are more than smoke and rubble. They are symbols. Symbols of a system breaking under its own weight. Symbols of a narrative that no longer holds the same grip. And within those flames lies something powerful, the beginning of a new global awareness, from students in Europe to citizens in the Middle East, from journalists in America to protesters in the streets of Israel. The message is clear. People are done watching injustice wear the mask of diplomacy. They are done accepting violence wrapped in political spin. They are done waiting for leaders to grow a conscience. This moment is not just political, it's deeply human. It's about the mother who lost her son in Gaza. It's about the Israeli who can no longer justify the silence. It's about the American who questions the price of their tax dollars funding war. It's about every soul that has felt powerless now, realizing they are part of a global voice that cannot be ignored. The unrest, the criticism, the courage to call out powerful figures like Trump. It's all part of a larger awakening. The world is no longer asking for change, it's expecting it, demanding it, creating it. And that's what makes this moment historic, not because of what was destroyed, but because of what was revealed. A generation that refuses to be fooled, a public that won't be silenced, a fire that won't die out. This is not the end. It's the start of something bigger, something louder, something true. A moment where truth rose through fire, and millions finally saw it for what it was, the first spark of real change. So now the mask is off. The truth stands tall in the smoke of burning streets and broken headlines. What happened wasn't just political theater. It was the result of years of arrogance, silence, and injustice piling up until the world finally said enough. Trump may have played the strong man, but the world saw through the act. He wasn't a peacemaker. He was a matchstick. And Tel Aviv, once seen as untouchable, became the place where silence exploded into sound, where the people, even from within, began to speak loud, clear, unshaken. This speech wasn't just about a man or a moment. It was about a message that justice delayed is never justice denied if the people still believe, that alliances built on imbalance will always shake, and that truth, real truth, always finds a way to rise, even through fire. So wherever you are in the world, let this be a reminder. Power without principle will fall. Fear, dressed as leadership, will be exposed. And in every corner of this earth, people are waking up, standing up, rising up. Because the future doesn't belong to bullies. It belongs to the brave. Thank you for staying with me till the end. Good luck on your journey. Stay aware, stay bold, and remember, when truth is spoken with courage, the whole world listens.